Welcome to Sister Radio. I'm Aki Thami. Some of you might know me from Sister Library, the first community owned, community run feminist library in South Asia. Just like the library, this space is about celebrating women. Each episode, I'm joined by a different sister for a conversation where we share our experiences and thoughts on everything, including art, activism, growing up, work, and of course, reading books written by female authors. Before introducing our guest for today, I want to thank all the listeners of Sister Radio for receiving us with so much love. Thank you so much. I hope the love keeps getting stronger as we grow together. I'm so happy to say that today we are joined by my dearest friend, sister, and resistor, Pradnya bin Sindhu. Pradnya is a doctoral scholar at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi, prior to which she was awarded a master's degree in Dalit and Tribal Studies at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. She is the editor of the Marathi section of the brilliant Roundtable India, one of my most favorite online spaces to learn in community. She is also an editorial member of Savari, a space for Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, and indigenous women to share perspectives from our history and our dreams for the future. Hello, sis, how are you?
I'm good, Aki. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful space. I'm really glad.
Oh, you're so
Thank you so
wonderful. I
much.
had to bring you on board and I had to make sure that people listen to your voice. It's so important.
Thank you so much.
Oh, where are you sheltered? Where are you?
I'm now at home in Aurangabad, Maharashtra. I'm staying with my mom.
And how is the situation there, the COVID situation?
Aurangabad is in red zone right now. We have over 2000 cases now, so it's pretty bad. It's quite difficult.
And how are you coping with the crisis?
We are just taking the preliminary precautions, not going out, but then it's also difficult to get the daily things that you require on daily basis. It's quite a struggle. The larger consequences of this crisis, I see it's going to be a huge challenge for the next couple of
Right.
years.
And is there something that you are working on currently while you are at home?
So I was working as an assistant professor, and my contract got over in April. Since I'm also enrolled for the PhD, I could not work on my thesis while I was working as a professor there. So this time I'm trying to utilize it. So I am actually working right now. I am spending most of my time on reading and just writing my thesis.
When teaching in India, it is so challenging because a majority of the classroom, it's composed of mainland students, caste Hindu students. It's a really strange feeling to have because I know I'm doing a PhD myself and I would like to get into academics,
Academics.
but the thought of having to go to a
Mhm.
classroom full of entitled people, just the thought makes me feel like, do I want to do that?
Yes.
Do I want to walk that path? How do you like teaching? Do you like it? How has your experience been?
Yes, yes. I was really afraid of teaching in the first place. I cannot really address a large public. It was also a learning experience for me to overcome my own weaknesses as well. To talk about the classroom settings, I was really fortunate to have a class of students who came from a very different background. Since the college is located in a small town, majority of the students were from the nearby villages, and most of them did not come from the formal educational settings as also. Many of them had dropped out in between. They were also elder to me. Some of them had already completed their bachelor's and they were trying to get back to the studies. Most of the students, they also worked as wage laborers, so their experiences were really varied. Since I myself being in setting like JNU where students from English medium background come and the majority of the conversation happens in English, so that was not the case when I was teaching at the college. Also, we always consider that English education is the only profound way of educating ourselves, but then when I actually stepped into that college and I started to observe students, started to work with them, because I also had to supervise them for their research and for their field work. So the kind of perspective these students have, irrespective of the fact that none of them really had a continuous education, but still their worldview was shaped by the kind of experiences they have in their own life. So yes, I really enjoyed that process of learning and unlearning also. So it was also kind of revelation to me that I was never been in that kind of an environment. Like there was no necessity of having this burden of being surrounded by so called intellectuals, or there was no such pressure of living in the constant state of conscious. That experience was really different for me, which I could gain in that particular college.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like a
I don't
really
know if I
good.
make sense, but
Yeah, what you said is absolutely right about having to be constantly conscious
yeah,
and having to prove our place in the
indeed.
institute is something that I have dealt with as well. And it is a really huge burden to carry, and it's never enough. They also want us to give up everything that we are and fit into their idea of what an intellectual is. It's a lot. I understand how these institutes are like in city spaces that are impermeable. Feels like it's such a difficult
Hmm.
place to go to. There is no
Yes,
way
yes.
one could enter spaces like
So
this.
it's same like when I first entered in TISS, it was a shock for me. Like I never knew infrastructure of that kind could exist and that could be called an educational institution. These things are really important. That's why I really felt it. The disconnect that one can feel being in institutions like TISS or JNU with the community is not there when we talk about the colleges or educational institutions at the local level.
Oh, but remember that one time we took over the institute, the time when we did the National Dalit and Adivasi Women's Congress?
And the greatest part of this organizing was that the Congress was organized by four women. I should say Aki Thami, Pradnya Jadhav, Manju, and Rashmi Birwa. Four of us from different languages, from different regions, from different social identities. We organized a gathering of leaders, professionals, students, artists, orators from Dalit Bahujan Adivasi communities, all women. It was very wonderful experience to learn from these women. And
Yeah, it was the first of its kind. It has never happened again, and it was amazing.
imagine we were so specific about involving delegates only from Dalit Bahujan Adivasi community. Other times, yeah, we are the first ones to get rejected, but then here they were professionals.
People like Dayamani Barla,
Yeah, just a day before she was in jail.
we were very mindful of not just inviting women from academia and so-called professional backgrounds, but also women who did not go to universities but were still impacting change making.
That was something, seriously. As you rightly said, we were kids then, right? You remember we had started to cry on the last day when we were all saying goodbye to the delegates.
Talking about being kids, tell me about the time when you were an actual child.
I grew up in Aurangabad throughout. My parents were both settled in Aurangabad. Aurangabad has a very rich history of, they say, Aurangabad is breeding ground for Dalit movement, and my parents both were active in the movement for quite long time. My mother worked as a community organizer in municipal corporation, and my father was a Dalit activist. He was a strong activist. In his previous days, he worked in Dalit Panthers. Then he joined Dalit Youth Front, which was a local political organization run by active Dalit youths in Marathwada, the region I am from. They also took upon many major issues such as establishing right over water in Marathwada region. Then there used to be boycotts on Dalits imposed by Savarnas. So Dalit Youth Front was a group whose activists would go to the village and they will try to resolve, or they will try. That was the major area of their work, working against Dalit atrocities and also creating awareness among the Dalit community about their rights and how they can acquire the rights. And then they were also involved in Namantar Andolan, which is very widely discussed Dalit movements in Maharashtra. So, and I'm the only daughter, so I really had a blessed childhood. I think I could take the legacy of my father.
Wow, you've got activism in your blood.
I think so. My father never claimed to be an activist. He would only say that he has to work for the community the best ways possible. They never used to teach me these things, but I could grasp all this. All Sundays, people would come to our home, and there used to be like long, long meetings and discussions about what are the issues that they have to take on agenda. I have seen all that environment, and that is how I started looking at me as one of the members of community. All that has really helped me to grow as a person.
It's beautiful, really is. Like, especially like the part where you said that your father said, I have to make this for the community, I have to do this as my contribution. So it was never about doing this great charity.
I really have problems people claiming that they're working for the movement. No movement demands any individual to, show your I card. Okay. It's very natural to one's being. I'm also reminded of the fact that these days running a movement has become a kind of business. Many people, they see it as an opportunity to get fame, or there are some vested interests to it. Whenever I think of my father or the senior Dalit activist, I don't see them with any kind of baggage or attitude that okay, oh, we are the ones who will, liberate you or who will emancipate you from your
You
hurdles.
rightly said, dissent has become so profitable now because everybody wants to be seen as actively participating towards dismantling structures of oppression and hierarchy, like even Pepsi. If everybody is working towards liberation of historically oppressed communities, then why are these structures still thriving? I don't understand. Like, everybody wants to be an activist, everybody wants to claim that they are activists, but nothing is changing, nothing is happening, and there's no connection, there's no care. It's moved so far from being a space of care because we as people have been denied affection and care and love, centuries of slavery and labor, and that caring for each other was never allowed for us. And it was within the community, within the movement, when we realized that I love this person and I care for this person and I don't want this to happen to this person. And like you said, nobody teaches these things to us. It just comes naturally. I want to protect you and I want to talk about you because I recognize you as my
Yes.
sister. I
And
find my
it's
community in you.
yes, and it's very it's a mutual feeling. I don't know if we would be talking if we did not have, if we never felt that way. You rightly said that we have been denied that kind of an affection, but then the kind of harsh experiences that we begin to experience is when we interact with the outer world, who see us as marginalized. Or I really have problems with calling myself as victim, but then that is how I have been projected all throughout in literature, in academic.
And it's true, it is the outside forces that teaches us. And I think even Bell Hooks has articulated where she talks about race is only felt when you leave the house. Within our community, we don't feel anything. It's only when we leave the community we're like, oh, wait a sec. Do you treat a human being like that? Like, what's going on with your mind?
Yes.
And when did you think you'll continue with academics? Was there a moment you decided, or did it just happen? Like,
Okay, so I really have Dr. Ambedkar's influence on my life. I think this would be last time I would be saying this because I've always found him around me. Like I never felt the need of mentioning it that I am impressed or I am motivated by Ambedkar, but I always had this kind of idea that one day I need to earn a doctorate. That is one major reason why I decided to come into academic. And secondly, after I completed my post graduation, I was working in Delhi with a human rights organization, Dalit Human Rights Organization. The kind of experience I got in those 2 years was really different. That particular phase of my life was very decisive in that sense because that's where I could think NGOs is was not my cup of tea, or it was so suffocating, and I really needed a way out. That is how I decided to
Sweet.
join.
Yeah, same about Baba Sahib. Even I was like, oh my goodness, I have to get a PhD.
Yes, it's a major influence on. It's a very profound thing. I think I have inherited from his legacy. I think, like me, there could be lakhs and there could be many
Yeah.
others
Exactly. Even
also.
for people who don't really read Ambedkar, imagery is so important. The statues that we see and the images of him that we see propped up by the roadside in Bombay. When you see Baba Sahib's
Mm-hmm.
statue, it's not like seeing a Gandhi or a Nehru. It's a very different thing. It holds a very different meaning. A lot of people don't realize it and then they blanket it as the same thing. It's
Yes,
it's a whole
I know.
different thing altogether. Do you want to tell us a bit about your PhD? What is your study on?
That's true. To mention very interesting thing about Marathwada is that it was always ruled by Nizam, and Nizam had given a pieces of lands to Mahars and people from the lower caste as a incentive about their service to his empire. Over the years, all this land was grabbed by the Savarnas, and now again a great activist like Eknath Awad, he started this demanding or encroaching the land, the grazing land. The land struggle in Marathwada is very famous, and many people have done their studies on that particular issue. Since I was always interested in environment, and in my PhD, I'm trying to explore environmental consequences of land rights movement, trying to see the caste relations, the gender relations in terms of land ownership, and how this overall environmental policy, impacts the so-called marginalized who are accessing their right over land. Finding my own theory to understand process of how people perceive land, as land has a different meaning. It's not just a piece of earth which will give you livelihood, but land is something about the dignity, something about having a right to life. Again, like, I'm trying to situate all my study in the overall environmental perspective, because environment, it's very elitist. Not many from marginalized communities have a say to state what they feel about environment.
I think it will be an amazing study and I look forward to reading it. Tell
Surely.
us about your working experience with Savary. I'm so excited to hear and learn from you what goes on into being an editor. Tell us everything.
um, I do have another few members with me on the editorial board, and I'm not the whole, but then it's been a very good experience for me. A girl from Marathwada who has studied in Marathi school all over her life is actually becoming a part of something global, something like Sauri. I don't know if I would be given this kind of an opportunity had I been in a Brahminical environment. Sauri was really a space for me to start to reflect myself. Writing has been my passion. We always have this kind of a feeling that, okay, we are going to write this, but is it going to be read well? How it will be perceived by the reader? So that kind of a notion we always have. I too had, but since I started writing in Savri, I started to feel, okay, I should not really worry how my writing is going to perceived by others. I'm writing for my own self. This is something I had never thought about doing myself. I'm actually writing, and that is all enough for me. With Savri, I am also growing, so it's a very wonderful experience so far.
Yeah, Savri is a really beautiful and a warm space, and like it's transformative, no? Because it's also a space for us women. Because of patriarchy that exists even within our communities, it's kind of difficult for us to articulate a lot of things around men. This is the space just for us where we can talk about our realities, and it's just, I'm in love with Savri. Like, really, the first time I started reading articles from it, 8 years
Yeah,
back or something, and the first time Anudidi told me, hey, do you want to write
yeah.
about this? Because I was like really ranting about something on Facebook,
Yes,
and then so it was that simple, and the space
free.
was just free. It wasn't like, oh, send me a draft and this is the word count.
Oh yes. Yes. So that's also a reason why I really enjoy being part of Sauri is that like in academic you feel so many restrictions. You have to cite each damn word that you think on your own, but then you have to give credit to someone else. That thing is not there. You are allowed to say things the way you want to say, write the way you want to write. There is no such restriction. Nobody is going to judge you the way you have expressed yourself. The so-called academic
Mhm.
journals, it would take like forever for you to get one damn article published, or there is no such process involved when we talk about Savri. That itself is very liberating for me, that having a confidence that I can approach this space is itself very, emancipatory in that sense.
Brilliant that you're creating this
Hmm.
space for women like you and me and many others who are denied
Yes.
so many spaces to take ownership of space and then learn from each other too, because there's so many articles there that I've read and felt like,
Yeah.
yo, this is fire. Like really, it has filled me with strength and courage to take on the world, because a lot of times the segregated lives that we live, it makes us feel like we are fighting this battle alone. But a space like Savary brings us together and we feel like, yes, we are in this together. I'm happy to be
Yes.
associated with a space like this, and
Yes.
I'm
Totally.
so
Totally.
proud of you, Pradnya, that you're running this space, you're like creating this space and inspiring so many
Thanks.
women like me.
Thank
You're
you.
wonderful. It's amazing the kind of work that you and Savri has been doing. And it's been how long that it has been working?
It's close. Yeah, it's been a decade already.
Yeah, it's a decade of amazing writings by Dalit, Bahujan,
Yes.
Adivasi, indigenous women. It's a great space. I highly recommend
Yes.
everyone to check it out. You're also editing the Marathi chapter of Roundtable India. Tell us about
Yes.
Roundtable India. I love Roundtable India so
Mhm.
much.
Yes. Yes. So the tagline says Roundtable India for an informed Ambedkarite age. So our vision is to annihilate the caste, and Roundtable India is a space where articulations from the world across are happening. People send in their write-ups about different issues, but then intending at the larger objective of annihilation of caste. Roundtable India is one of the first of its kind that has existed for almost 10 years without fail, without break, and we are still growing. I mean, Roundtable India is perhaps the only website which is continuously publishing articles daily, at least three of them you could see. It's a huge content, and there is no such rule of rejection, submission, and so that way it's very personal to me also. It's something that has given me that kind of a community feeling. It's not that I'm going in person asking for people, okay, are you from my community, but then whenever I decide to go and check the website, I feel there is a connection, and people, irrespective of their languages, maybe they may not be from India, but then there is a kind of connectedness. I feel Roundtable India is a space which is giving me this, it's giving that space for those interested to learn and understand, unlearn also. Yes.
And it's also because it's very current. The articles that are written are topical. It's about what's
Yes.
happening right now. It's packed with emotions, which I find lacking in a lot of academic journals. There is energy and it's so personal. Yeah, it's also a lesson, I think, for people like me to be able to work with sincerity and dedication, because our battles are hard. They are so hard. But we have great examples. To publish 3 articles every day, to edit them, wow.
It's a huge labor. They're doing it. It's being done by along their own personal work commitments.
And in fact, Roundtable India does not even have advertisements in the website. It's totally free, it's available, it's out there, and it's this huge wealth of knowledge. And I'm so thankful that it exists. And now we have a
Mhm.
Marathi version of the
Yes.
Roundtable India.
Yes. The reason why we thought about Marathi version is that we might want to have the Roundtable India for each language, because the kind of expressions we get in regional languages are uncomparable. They are the crux, very organic, it's very original. So that's why we felt we'll do right in Marathi, and they are very good. Similarly, there is a Kannada, Gujarati version as well, Hindi version of Roundtable India also.
It's a brilliant idea. Congratulations. It's going to be so amazing. It's amazing. It's inspirational. I'm going to ask you if you can give some advice or suggestions people who are looking at getting into universities, publishing their work, or getting into editing. What would it be?
We always have this inhibition while writing. So first thing is
Mm,
to start writing
brilliant.
without worrying much about how is it going to be seen, how is it going to have the proper sentences. Taking a pen and starting to write is the only and is the first step towards you becoming, a writer. And have faith. It's not that first thing is to have faith in yourself. You need to tell yourself that whatever you are going to write is going to please you. You are not writing to please others, or it's not for others. It's for yourself that you want to write something. Having that kind of faith in yourself is very essential, I feel.
Great advice. Now, can you share some works of women? It could be books or it could be music or anything that you'd want to share with.
I'm really fond of Babitai Kamble. Her autobiography in Marathi, it's called Jina Amucha. It's available in English. The book name is The Prison We Broke. Then Hira Bansode is my favorite poet. She's a Dalit woman and she writes like phenomenal poetry. I can really suggest there is a very nice website called, I think, dalitpoetry.com. You'll get to see many other translated into
Amazing.
English. They are from Gujarati, from
Mm-hmm.
Marathi, from Kannada. I think I can suggest.
Great. Do you have any organizations that you are supporting during this time? Any organization you would want to give a shout out to for working around COVID and aid or
In
anything?
my hometown, I have seen many small groups. I don't think they really have a name. There is one group called Samyak about the Upasak Sangha. They have been very consistent in providing grains and trying to reach out to the people who have been, badly hit by the lockdown. Since the lockdown was so abruptly imposed on us, none of us were really prepared.
I mean, like even if the grains are available, a lot of people don't have savings to buy a lot of it and like store it. Can you
Yes.
tell us how can one be a sister supporter?
I think we need to have trust for each other, and we need to believe without judging, without having any kind of judgment for the other person. That is a huge support. And secondly, we need to learn to be good listeners also. We really don't have to jump on giving suggestions if somebody is in need of help. First thing is that we need to listen to the other person and understand. That kind of a compassion and faith is very much essential if you want to be a sister supporter. These are very basic things, but I think most of us at times we tend to, overlook these very basic things.
Awesome. Yeah. Be compassionate to your sisters and listen to us. Listen to your sisters. It's so important. Be good listeners. Can you tell us where we can follow your work? If you are on Instagram, Facebook.
I write on Roundtable India, Savri, and I'm also there on Facebook as Prajna Jadhav. I'm there on Instagram as Prajna Jadhav, so I'm there.
You heard her. She's there. Go look for her. Roundtable
But
India is roundtableindia.co.in and Savary is dalitweb.org. DALITWEB.org. She's also on Facebook and Instagram.
it's been wonderful talking to you. So thank you for giving me this special opportunity to talk about my life. This has been an opportunity for me to reflect on my own life and talk about my childhood.
No, it's okay, darling. It's fine. Thank you for joining me today. It's always always such a good time I have with you, whether it is like meeting you in person or talking with you on the phone. This has been so great and I really enjoyed it. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for being an amazing sister that I can just pick up my phone and call at any point. And thank you for your endless labor that you put into Savary, creating spaces for us to write and share. And also, thank you for the things that you write in Savary, the amazing things that you write. You are a gift, Pradnya, and I really appreciate that you are my friend and I can talk to you. Yeah, you're a sister, and I love you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Sister Radio. You just heard a conversation between me, Akitami, and Pradnya Bhimsindhu. Make sure to check out roundtableindia.co.in and Savary at dalitweb.org. You can also follow Pradnya on her Facebook and her Instagram. If you want to support Sister Library, please check our crowdfunder. You can follow us on Instagram at sister.library and on Twitter at sisterlibrary. You can write to us at ilovereadingwomen@gmail.com. Music for Sister Radio is by Shasha Patel. Thank you. See you next time and keep celebrating women.